I'd like to start, if I may, with a question. Why are you here? Perhaps you're here because you're hoping to have some inspiration or to learn something. Perhaps you're here because you want a little bit of entertainment. Perhaps you're here because you'd like to impress some people. Perhaps you've been networking and socialising and chatting with people as you listen and watch this talk. Yeah. Perhaps you're here because someone asked you to come and to watch it and you didn't really want to be here. And you're being very polite, but actually they can probably tell you don't really want to be here. Because we have lots of reasons why we would come. There are lots of reasons why we might be here. There are also reasons like our past. One of the reasons why we'll all be here is because something happened to us in the past. Yesterday, last week, last month, a few years ago, maybe many years ago. One thing's for certain is that everyone in this room is here because of our mother and our father. That was certain. And we're here because certain events have happened from the moment of our birth until this moment here, right now. So what I'm saying here is that there's lots of reasons why we're here. And it's not because it's just one reason. All of us are here for multiple reasons. None of us is here for a single reason. We're here for lots of reasons, and that's very complicated. So the thing that I'd like to share with you, the idea I'd like to share with you today, is to perhaps explore with you the idea that if we are more aware of all the reasons why we're here and why we get here and how we get here, that is deeply connected to the choices that we make and the choices that we don't make. And then of course, is connected to the events that follow. Yeah? So it's a bit like saying to you, in order to look forwards, in order to move forwards, we need to just look back and understand what's happened with history, our own history. And as we start looking back with our own history, we start uncovering things that influence why we're really here. Yeah? Things that we often don't like to look at, that are not often visible to us, or we choose to ignore. They just become unconscious. Sometimes we do things, and we don't know why. We tell people why we're going to do things, or tell people why we've done them, but that doesn't mean that's the real reason why we've done them. We trick ourselves, we delude ourselves. Sometimes we do something and then 5 years later we work out why we were really doing it. And sometimes we do things spontaneously. And when we do things spontaneously, we're not even aware we have a choice. But we do things anyway. But the choice, the spontaneity, the impulse that comes from that is probably based on something we experienced in the past. Not aware of it. So the task this afternoon is really just to become more aware of what goes on. And I started looking at this. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I got towards this. And I started looking at this about 20 years ago, is where it all goes. So why am I here? Well, about 20 years ago, I was very interested in organisations. Keen, young, 30-year-old man, looking at why organisations change and more often why they don't change. And it was an exciting time to be doing that. But the more I looked at this, the more I started to realise that, well, it's not really about organisations. Of course, it's about individual people. And I started to realise, of course, we all know this, but at the time it was a breakthrough for me, is that individuals do things differently, that one manager will lead an organisation this way and a different manager would lead the same organisation in a different way. And is that because of their personality? Possibly, different personalities. But what I really found was it's about the fact that they've had different histories, that they're bringing their history with them wherever they come to a situation. Their baggage walks in the door and walks around with them constantly, wherever they go. And so I started to focus much more on the individual and their journey. And as I started to follow managers' journeys through life, whether they're leading businesses or schools or even parents, whatever the journey is through life, I started to observe, of course, that people become more successful. Often people become more successful. And as they become more successful, they're given more and more responsibility. And then as they get more and more responsibility, things get a little bit more difficult in terms of taking, things being at stake. There's a lot more at stake. And so what they start to say is, well, can we just have something more predictable coming out of this, please? So you get to the point where people who are working and have been very successful are saying, well, actually, could we have no surprises, please? Now, that won't be a surprise to many people in this audience, but what is interesting is, well, why is that the case? People who've got lots of energy early in their careers suddenly start moving towards a situation where they've got less choice. They can't move. They feel a little bit stuck. They can't move. I always thought as I got older and earned more money, I'd have more freedom and more choice. But it seems to have worked the other way around. That actually, the more responsibility and the more success that one has, the less choice I actually have. So I might have a big office, but in actual fact, it feels like this elevator. I can't move. And so I started studying this and looking at this with individuals' lives and what they're doing, because I had to turn what I was looking at on its head, that I was really interested in why people got stuck. And how do you unstuck them? Now, there's a technical term for this. It's called midlife. You know where I'm going. Yeah. It starts sometime after the early successes in life and finishes just before retirement. That's an awfully long time to be stuck in an elevator. An awfully long time. And of course, we're not stuck all the time. And the thing I'm not going to say is stuck is bad. What I'm going to say is, are you aware you're stuck? Was I aware that I was stuck? Because most managers, when I interview them, they'll say, oh yeah, fantastic, look at what we're doing, and we're doing this innovation here. But actually, when you push a little bit harder, you realise the choices are not as great as they're being presented. We all do this. So I'm interested in studying why people get stuck and how they get stuck. And my hypothesis or my idea was that if we could look at people's pasts, if we could unlock their past, would we unlock their present? Could we explore past? Why am I here? What's the past been all about? So I looked for some people to study, but of course I had to start with myself. So I started my career actually going much further back than when I started my research career. I finished high school, someone very interested in science. I loved science and I thought I'd be good at it, so I thought I'd study science. But curiously, before I started my science degree, I headed off to France and Italy to study languages and theatre, and then spent a wonderful summer in 1980 doing a summer music school in Siena in Italy. It was unforgettable and I loved it. Every minute was just full of writing and composing. I fell in love with writing music, with playing music, with listening to music. It was fantastic. And I can still remember the day. It was the 2nd of August, 1980. And I wrote a letter to my parents. I still have it. And it just says, scrap the science, I'm just doing music for life. It was wonderful. Yeah? And they were, of course, I think they were probably surprised by that, but they got used to it fairly quickly. And I went and did this thing in music. And I had a wonderful time learning music. And actually I worked a lot with adolescents and teenagers in what they did and helping them to compose and write and do things with music. And it was wonderful. I spent my entire 20s doing that. But then towards the end of the 20s, my 20s, I started to ask a few more questions. And the questions were largely around, well, I want more. I want to achieve more. Perhaps I wanted more success. Perhaps I had more ambition and I was just ambitious to do more. So I headed off to business school, the place where you let out those ambitions. Yeah? And I let them out. And that was actually also a very lovely experience, a wonderful experience studying economics and so on. And it was great 2 years doing that, but when the crisis happened when it finished, aged 30. And then suddenly at age 30, I'm looking at this and going, what do I do with this life? Who'll take me? And I spent quite a long time thinking about it. And it was honestly a period where I was quite lost. But then what I started to do was I started to get in my car. I was living in Sydney in Australia, and I got in my car and just drove down the south coast to a beach house. And I put in the back of the car a whiteboard. And it was just me and the whiteboard for a week's vacation. Yeah? My friends used to tease me all the time. Benny, where are you going with your whiteboard this week? Taking it to Melbourne? Yeah? But I'd go places with my whiteboard, and I'd sit by the beach and I would literally spend a week just writing things down. What do I like? What do I not like? What am I passionate about? What am I not passionate about? And it kind of got me going. And eventually I ended up with 3 things: that I loved understanding people and human behaviour, and that I loved doing things creative, and I loved teaching. And it wasn't like the lights went on suddenly, but it was just like it took a few years before all of that sort of fell into, and I ended up going to PhD and studying organisational behaviour and sociology. Here I am. So here's the problem, is then I have to start making sense of this very zigzag journey. Why would I do this? Science, then music, then business school, then social sciences and sociology. So I started to make sense of it by thinking about it in terms of an inner journey and an outer journey. Now, the outer journey was that part of me that kept on looking for approval and respect. It's that feeling that you get when you say, I want to make my mum and dad proud. Now, of course, once we get to 20, we don't ever admit that to anybody. But truthfully, even age 50, I still find myself wanting mum and dad to be a little bit proud. Little bit, still. It's still there. And I reckon it's still there for most people. I'm not sure, but I think so. So the outer journey is very much how do we make ourselves, how do we feel competent about ourselves? It's also about avoiding unpleasant feelings, things like I feel incompetent, or I feel ashamed of myself, or I feel like there's going to be some harsh criticism, so I don't want that. So I'll make choices in my outer journey to maximise the feeling that I'm okay, I'm a very competent person. Now, the inner journey, on the other hand, is where we throw away the whole idea that I care what other people think. The inner journey is the journey where I just say, look, I'm just here for the sheer pleasure of loving music or loving whatever it is, and I've got no consciousness of other people. Yeah? I don't care what other people think. I'm fully independent of everybody else. Now, don't worry, I go to bed like you and say, I don't care what so-and-so thinks, and then lie awake the whole night worrying about them. Yeah? So I'm not talking about what we say, I'm talking about what we feel deep down. Do we really not care about what... Those moments are what we call the inner journey. And what's interesting is this tug of war, this pull and push that happens between the inner journey and the outer journey. It's a struggle. It's a struggle the way the two of them fight each other. Because I think the outer journey wins most of the time. And I studied this with lots of managers and lots of people travelling through life, and it seemed to be the case that we get very caught up in the outer journey, and the outer journey is the recipe for getting stuck. It's the place where we will get stuck because we have to have that constant affirmation about ourselves. And the only place we get freed from it is when we go into the inner journey. But the inner journey is not such a pleasant place sometimes. And we'll see why in a minute. So I've got 3 things that I'd like to share with you about what you might be able to take away from this and learn. This is what I've learned from this. Number 1, I think we do have to look at our past and understand why we're here. It's not a straightforward, simple, smart question. It's a very complicated question. We all have messy, complicated pasts. And in all of that, we need to join the dots and find what's the thread that joins everything together. Now, it's never one thread, but you have to find a thread. And of course, that thread will be different. The thread I have today is different from the thread I found 5, 6 years ago. Very different. So we have to keep looking for different threads. You know, when I said my career was very disjointed with music and lots of different things, that's true. But when I did this exercise of just trying to find the line, what made sense to me was looking at myself, age 20, working with adolescents and helping them to use music to express themselves and to find their inner voice. And then I look what I do today in my 50s. I work with managers in the middle of organisations, helping them to find their inner voice because they're stuck and they don't know that they're stuck. So in fact, there's not a lot difference to what I did when I was 20 to what I'm doing today. That's my thread. What's yours? How do you join the dots together? The second thing that I learnt was that we have to learn to let go. Once we find the thread and we locate the thread and we say, well, this is the thread to life, then we have to let go of some things. We have to clear some stuff out to make space for new choices, for new avenues to go in. Yeah? Because the outer journey will keep on letting us keep things and accumulating things all the time. Now, if you're in any doubt about this, just think of day-to-day behaviour. We hold on to things. It's an extraordinary and curious trait of human beings that we must hold on to things. We hold on to people. We hold on to jobs. We hold on to the people we work with. We hold on to routines. We hold on to spreadsheets. Well, we always do it with this spreadsheet. We always have the document this way. We hold on to things. We have to hold on. When someone comes in and says, well, we need to do it differently. Well, no, but this is the way we always do it, trust me. Yeah? We hold on to the seating arrangement at family reunions. And when you listen to the conversations of the family reunions, it's the same as what it's always been. Yeah? Just 30 years later. Yeah? So we hold on to stuff, and that holding on stops us from letting go and then opening the doors for other stuff to come in. So we do need to let go. And the last thing that I've learned through all of this work and the things that I suggest to people is what we call leaning into the moment, finding this inner voice. I'd like you to imagine for a minute that there is a freezing cold wind outside and it's blowing about 60, 70 kilometres an hour. And I'd like you to go outside and stand in it. And you stand out there and you go, find me shelter. Yeah? And will you look for shelter? Or will you say, no, actually, what I'd like to do is just to lean into this wind. And so you start leaning into it. And what does that feel like as you lean into it? What does it feel like? Does it feel exciting and exhilarating? Or does it feel painful? What does it feel like? Does it feel like it's terribly scary? Or do you feel like the wind is going to hold you? It's going to catch you? That's what leaning into the inner journey is like. It's got pain and pleasure all over it. Yeah? All these things together. But of course we can avoid all that if we stay in our elevator and avoid any of the risks and the challenges that are there. So this is what I mean by leaning in to the inner journey. This is what I mean by being more mindful about what's going on for you right now. What is going on for you right now? How are you feeling? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling distracted? Do you find your mind's wandering off somewhere else? Yeah? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling upset? Are you thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow? All of these thoughts are going through people's minds in this room right now. All of them. And it's just to lean into them and be aware of them, that this is what goes on. So I'll leave you this. This is partly why what we need to do is to think about, well, ask ourselves the question, why are we here? And asking yourself the question, why are you here, we need to look deeper at what other things are going on that we're not aware of. Because if we don't do that, we're sure as anything not going to be aware of the fact that we're stuck in an elevator or in a job or in a family, the thing with things unfolding towards the inevitable. So the work to do is largely about just finding threads, finding lines that join dots together, that answers the question, why are you here? Find, if you can, a way of letting go, and hold on to the things that you need to hold on to. And last but not least, leading into the wind. Because we all have a journey. We all have a journey, our own unique journey. And it's as if we're on a train, travelling down a set of tracks with our eyes on the destination. This is where we want to get to. Yeah? And what we're forgetting about is there's the destination and there's the journey itself. Because as you travel on that train, it's passing over junctions and side rails and sidings that you're not even aware of because you're just thinking destination. And being more mindful means just stop, slow it all down and be aware of all of the junctions that you're passing over. Bring in the choices that might be available to you as you travel there. Be more mindful of the journey as well as the destination. And with that, this is the way we can all have our own unique journey.